We're live. Okay. Thank you, Amanda. So for everyone out there, welcome to the Joint Interim Transportation Highways Military Affairs Committee. I'd ask you all to at least silence your cell phones, please, unless you're maybe awaiting an organ transplant or donating an organ. I guess that'd be acceptable. Otherwise, silence, please. So a lot of work to do, short time to do it in. So I'll be pushing the clock a little bit, if you don't mind. Mr. Co-Chairman, anything else on introduction?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple of comments. First of all, thanks to all of you who were able to attend this morning. I think that gave us a perspective on a couple of facilities, and appreciated our military folks showing us around out at the Oregon Trail Cemetery. It's one of the real jewels of our state. You'll notice that this agenda, to all of those watching and then to the committee, is really designed for all of us to get up to speed and set a foundation for what we need to be up to in transportation and military affairs. So it's really an educational meeting this weekend, or these 2 days, I should say. And I hope you find it educational. I know that I will. It's been a few years since I've served on this committee, and I'm glad to be back. Looking forward to working with all of you. And Mr. Co-Chairman, take it away.
Thank you. I guess I can make this official. Somebody left this for me, and it's a lot heavier than it looks. So that's pretty good. I like that. Yeah. So with that, Heather, Mary Beth, one of you take the roll, please.
Senator Anderson. Senator Furphy. Senator McEwen. Senator Pappas. Representative Baker. Representative Brown. Representative Burt. Representative Henderson. Representative McGuire. Representative Obermueller. Representative Obermueller. Representative O'Hearn. Representative Stivar. Co-Chairman Landon. Co-Chairman Burkhart.
Here. So with that, Representative O'Hearn is obviously having some electronic difficulties. Yes, we will publicly embarrass people. So thank you. First order of business would be the adoption of interim committee meeting rules, and those were previously circulated to the committee, and I would entertain a motion to approve those, with the exception of deleting the last sentence on paragraph page 1. And the reason for that is that management council deleted that wording. So. Okay, seconded. All right, all in favor? Aye. Discussion. Is there a second? Seconded by, nope. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay. Senator Pappas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The issue there, I think he's bringing up a good point about the parties, but it does say as nearly as possible. And frankly, I think we ought to not remove the requirement out of the rules just because we can't comply to it. I really think that language ought to be in there, or else he may be, facing some real stiff issues if we're saying we're going to take out the party just because we don't have one on the committee. We don't have a Democrat on the committee. So it doesn't preclude us from not, because it says nearly as possible. And frankly, they've chosen not to staff this committee because of their low numbers. But I don't think we ought to remove the rule.
Senator Anderson. Okay, one question before we go any further. Do these microphones broadcast in this room? Okay, you can hear us, I guess, so the audience can hear us, but I guess some committee members are having problems hearing us. Representative McGuire.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would agree with good Senator Anderson. And the reason being is if you read Mason's, it says that when you're off the floor, when you're out of session, and when you're in a joint committee, that it is just that, it's a joint committee. And that everybody should have an equal voice on the committee, and it shouldn't be divvied up, whether it be by political affiliation or anything else. So I think he's correct, and I think that that follows Mason's.
Representative Brown.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I guess maybe my question is as I look at this, if I think I'm underneath the right area here, this is a subcommittee discussion. And so my question actually relates back down to whether or not we plan on having subcommittees diving into this and whether this discussion is even truly pertinent, considering that this is actually underneath the subcommittees, not the actual committee itself as a joint interim committee.
Mr. Co-Chairman.
You know, I think Representative Brown brings up a good point, and it really is going to rest with the two chairmen as to how a subcommittee is going to be put together, if and when we were to do that. And given the fact that our transportation committee does not have a member from the minority party, it actually really does not pertain to us in this interim, I guess. So I'm kind of with Representative Brown. I'm not sure we really need to be concerned with it. Thank you.
Senator Anderson.
Mr. Chairman, just to wrap it up, I do think we need to eliminate it. It says proportional, nearly proportional representation of House and Senate for the subcommittees, and then splitting the political parties. I don't think any of that pertains to us, so I think we ought to eliminate it. Thank you.
Further discussion? Okay, so we're voting on the motion to remove under paragraph Romanet or Roman numeral 4A1. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no? Okay, motion fails.
Division.
No,
No,
okay.
no.
All right. Okay, anything else on the rules? Anything else? Okay, all in favor? Wait a minute. Senator Anderson, something else on the rules? Okay, all in favor of the rules as presented? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no? Okay. Motion carries. So those are the rules of the committee for the interim. With that, I think we'll just move right into General Porter and the Military Affairs Department. General, please. Okay. Should come on as red. Okay, just a minute. Joe, please, if you would. You got the center button? The little voice? Okay. Just a moment with the technology. There we go.
Hey, good morning, Mr. Chairman,
Thank you.
fellow member or the members of the committee. My name for the record is Major General Greg Porter, and I'm the Service Adjutant General for the state of Wyoming. And it's a pleasure to see all of you face to face finally after so many months of Zoom calls and conference calls. So thank you very much. I did want to also thank you this morning to the committee for being out there at the Oregon State Trail Cemetery. That certainly means a lot to the Veterans Commission and those of us here in Wyoming that you took an interest to see for yourselves what a great facility that's being run there on behalf of the veterans. So thank you very much for being there today.
You're welcome, General. And just one further one for all those people here and those watching on PBS, if you get a chance, you should go out there to the Veterans Center, State Veterans Cemetery, north of Evansville, and have a look at that really wonderful facility. Very sobering experience to realize why it's there and all of that. So, General, proceed.
Thank you, sir. Sir, I think we'll be going off of our slides that you have in front of you. I will have a few corrections to make, then I'll make those as we go by. Just some updated information since the slides were produced. But right now I'm on slide 2, the agenda. And we'll start with a quick military department opening remarks and updates, and I won't go through there. And then we'll move to the interim study topics, of which we're going to talk about the Oregon State Trail Cemetery, some recruiting and retention options that perhaps the state of Wyoming could do, and we'll end up with the temporary delegation of parental authority.
Proceed.
Sounds good, sir. Let me go to slide 3 if I could, and just give you a quick summation of the COVID-19 updates and where we sit. We did have some missions. Certainly, we weren't as a National Guard tasked as many other states, certainly as hard as other states, but we did have quite a few missions within the state. From almost the beginning of the pandemic it started, we had members of our civil support team at the state lab. We had some equipment that aided in the swiftness of diagnosing and doing testing for COVID that was beneficial to the state. And so we had folks out there for a good 7 months in the first. Then we took a break over the summer and started up when we spiked this last November, and we just got them off there before Christmas. We did also send some of our folks out of the 187th, out of our Wyoming Air Guard, out to the coast to help Indo-PACOM personnel. There was a tremendous amount of COVID on our naval vessels, and they were really struggling to process all those folks as they brought them off. So we sent about 7 individuals out there to assist Indo-PACOM in getting that happen. So we brought them all back now. That mission is done and complete, and we're finished. They did a great job. Got a call back from their commander, just saying, well, again, you ought to be proud of your Wyoming airmen because they do a great job. We did do a quick short COVID mapping mission. The Department of Health got a little behind when we started the spike in the early fall, before they could get a contract put together to have some folks help them with COVID mapping. The National Guard stepped in for about a 30-day period to assist with that. And that was primarily just doing some phone calls and letting people know whether they tested positive or not, and that sort of thing. So that was a 30-day mission. We ended that, and again, all the folks are great. Did a great job. Had a really 4 hospital support missions for the hospitals listed here, about 20 soldiers and airmen in each location. Our healthcare workers were obviously getting pretty strained by that time, and they needed some help. And our folks did everything from laundry to ran vaccination lines, to coordinating vaccination times, to anything that the hospitals needed. And so they did a great job. Casper was our last hospital that we finished up. And again, we're pretty much done with the COVID piece. We did have some COVID interagency working group that we had about 20 folks that helped with the planning and execution of the COVID strategy for the state of Wyoming. Secretary of State primarily ran that for the governor, but also the Department of Health and the Department of our Wyoming Office of Homeland Security participated in that. Wyoming Military Department, the National Guard was not immune from COVID. We did have some cases. We had 267 positive cases over the course of the pandemic. We currently have just 1 case left now. I think it says 3 here, but we're down to 1 and 266 recovered cases. So we never did have any of our soldiers or airmen we had 2 hospitalizations, but they weren't there for very long. And right now they've made pretty good recovery. We do have a few soldiers and airmen that are experiencing some effects of COVID still that we're working through, but they continue to be able to serve and do their missions. We currently have 933 folks vaccinated, and 40 with just 1 of the 2. So about 30%, just short of 30% of our force is vaccinated. Just slightly less than the entire population of Wyoming. I think the population of Wyoming is a little bit higher than that, but until that, when and if that becomes mandatory, I think it'll stay right around that number, 30%. That's all I have for this. Is there any questions, Mr. Chairman, or I can move on to page 4?
Please move on.
All right. So on page 4, we're really going to talk the deployments, missions, and events. And we've really started to pull back in terms of the national deployments in support of planned operations. We only have 2 airmen currently deployed, and only 1 soldier right now that's deployed. I'm not tracking any Army deployments for the next year. There's potentially one next spring with our aviation rotary wing folks, but I think we're going to wait and see what the Afghanistan withdrawal, how that looks and how that'll affect it. So we still have some work to do there. We are expecting a pretty busy fire season. Mobile airborne firefighting system, our MAFs, at the C-130s that we have already been training and have been certified, and they're ready to go. But we're predicting with the drought across the Western United States, it could be a pretty busy summer. The Joint Staff really finishing up any last minute COVID support and coordination. We do have a busy fire season, as I said, and we're getting ready for a pretty large exercise in 2023 called Vigilant Guard. It's a large scale disaster exercise, domestic operations, and we're starting to prepare for that. That's a pretty big lift. And that's actually going to be a lot of the interagency will participate with that. Wyoming Office of Homeland Security, Department of Health, a lot of those folks are doing that. If we go to projects and events, the Air Guard, we did receive our C-130 simulator, which is
Joe, please. The microphone just went dead again.
there we go. I should leave too.
No, thank you. And for all of those out there watching on the internet, this is all kind of new for us, technology and making it mobile, move it around the state. We still want to have meetings throughout the state, so we have to put up with a few technical glitches at times.
All right. Thank you,
We
Mr.
did bring
Chairman.
our own IT support with us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, before we get into the projects and events, can I ask you to just flesh out a little bit what support we're able to provide during a fire season, for example? What does that look like, and what can our Guard do in that respect?
Yes, sir,
What
Mr.
are
Chairman.
we flying? What are we dropping water? What are we putting people on the ground? What exactly does that look like?
Sure, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Co-Chairman. For the mobile airborne firefighting system, that is, we own the aircraft as the Department of Defense in the state of Wyoming, the C-130 aircraft. But the mass units that dispense the retardant is actually owned by the Forestry Department. That's their business. So we generally deploy in support of the larger national effort with NIFC. So that's usually only done when all the civilian tankers have been used up, all the other assets come up. Then because of the Economy Act, the Department of Defense can get involved with that. So we plan on doing MAFs every year. We did quite a bit of MAFs last year. 2019, we didn't ever even get activated and go anywhere. So it kind of depends on the fire season. Our best estimates right now is it's going to be a pretty significant fire season again on the West Coast and even to some degree here. So for MAFs, we plan it every year, and we plan to go do that. And they dispense fire retardant. Their job is it's to slow fires down. They put that retardant in front of fires, and it's really to buy time for our folks on the ground. That's really where the fight's won, with forest fires on the ground, and that's what their purpose is. We also can do a couple of other things. Traditionally, when our firefighters fight in some pretty remote areas, they can't get ground ambulance into them. So oftentimes we provide medevac support to federal fires as that happens. It just depends on the fire and on whether they think they can get to folks quickly in case there's an accident. We generally don't do ground crews for deployment in the state. That's usually a discussion with the state forester, Bill Crapser. It takes us about 2 weeks to spin up to do red card training and get folks ready to go. So we try to, we've only done that a couple of times in my history, and it's all based on what we think the fire season looks like right now. So far, we think that we're not going to be needed to be able to do that. On Camp Guernsey, however, our darkest, deepest fears as the Adjutant General is fires leaving Camp Guernsey and affecting our neighbors. So we do have about 40 trained red card holders on Camp Guernsey, plus our UH-60 Bambi buckets that we can provide. We also do have the Bambi buckets, the 500-gallon buckets that go under a Black Hawk helicopter that we can do initial attack with. But the state of Wyoming also has a private contract with an initial attack helicopter folks too. So it usually has to start getting out of assets in Wyoming before we start to spin up the Blackhawks. But those are the kind of things we can do. Right now, I would suspect we may do a medevac or two for a fire, and we're certainly going to deploy in mass. I think we're going to keep our fingers crossed and see what it looks like in Guernsey, but that's our focus there. If that answers the question, Mr. Chairman.
Appreciate that, General. Thank you.
Senator Anderson. Yeah, I think mine did too.
I can hear you, sir.
General?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Anderson, that was an individual deployment that the soldier got the chance to serve at the Spartan Shield headquarters. And they're out there in the headquarters probably for about a 9-month mission, sort of a broadening assignment. They're in Kuwait, sir.
General, proceed.
Thanks, sir. So I believe I left off talking about the simulator, which is a pretty significant event for us. We've been trying to get a simulator for the C-130s for probably 5 or 6 years, and we actually do have it in possession now, and they're sitting up right now. When it's up and going, they're actually going to take down the simulators in Little Rock, and so we'll be getting about 60 crews a month, 30 crews a month coming into Cheyenne to do simulator training with us, and so it's a good deal for us. If you look in the picture, that's a picture taken from
General, 1 moment.
Yes,
please.
sir.
Senator Anderson. I'm sorry, Senator Pappas.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Could you tell me, are they, when they do have that simulator installed and up and running, will there be a ribbon cutting or a public event that we can, that maybe the committee could attend or members of the committee could attend?
Yeah, absolutely, Mr. Chairman.
General, please.
Absolutely, Senator. Yep, we will do that. Yes, sir. Yep.
Other questions? I don't want to miss anyone. Okay, General, please proceed.
Yes, sir. If you look at the picture there, you'll see taken from the side of the C-130 of Wyoming C-130. This is in Southern Strike last month. Some F-22s there. We had 2 C-130s. Actually, Ryan to my right over here participated in that event. He was down there keeping the C-130s rolling. They did some great training down there. Did a lot of work with special operations, pushing some soldiers out the back, paratroop activities, and they did a great job. Almost from the moment Major Moy and I hit the ground, they were singing the praises of your Wyoming Airmen and saying how good Wyoming is doing. So it was a great training event. They do a great job. On the Army National Guard, we'll shoot rockets live fire on the 14th of June. The intent is to get the governor there to show him some of the capabilities. He hasn't had an opportunity to do that yet. And we've got a few guests that we've invited to be able to see that. There's also a big warfighter exercise that's going to take place this summer, or excuse me, this fall with the 115th, and they're gearing up for this one. On the Joint Staff, as many of you are aware, we do have a state partnership program with the country of Tunisia. And so Tunisia's been going through its COVID battles itself, and certainly it's got some economic trying times, but they have a new ambassador to the United States, just arrived in January, and we're going to bring him out over Frontier Days. And he's very excited. He's got a lot of good ideas and certainly wants to continue to grow this partnership. So we're pretty excited to have him out. Just very quickly on the Veterans Commission, there'll be a meeting in Buffalo on the 4th of June for those of you that might be interested. The Wyoming Cowboy Challenge Academy, we're finishing up currently with class 43. They'll graduate on the 18th of June, and we'll start at 44 on the 12th of July. So thanks to your good work, we were able to keep that program going, and we can still continue to, I think, aid the state of Wyoming with pushing out some good young citizens. We're doing a lot of construction in Camp Guernsey right now, finishing up the tactical airstrip in the north. That'll provide us some really strong training capability in terms of what we can do by putting more aircraft on the ground. And we've got a big training exercise starting in June, bringing about 2,200 soldiers and airmen in from across the nation. They're getting preparing an infantry brigade or infantry battalion, field artillery brigade for deployment. And it's called XCTC. You'll hear us talk about that. That's the exportable combat training capability. So we try to do that every year out in Guernsey, and that brings us a lot of resources, and it's a great place to train.
Yes, can you, General Ford, can you explain how the relationship with the active duty Air Force, how that's been going with the Camp Guernsey?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Pappas, we have a great relationship right now. Currently members of the 90th Missile Wing and have a tenant facility running in Camp Guernsey. So what they were doing is basically any airman, active component airman that was going outside the wire in country had to come to Guernsey to get the training to be able to do that. And so while that started to drop off a little bit, that training still goes on. Also, the 3 missile wings that are in this part of in Montana, in North Dakota, in Wyoming, they use all of that for that of our Guernsey facilities to do training, react if they have somebody that tries to take a missile while it's being transported, all that good stuff. So we have a pretty robust training capability with them. They've got a shoot house, a live fire shoot house on there that we actually get to use. And there's a great partnership with the active duty Air Force, sir.
Chairman, yeah, follow it. Maybe I should have, has it changed at all since the inception and then going with COVID, or is the mission still the same and still, I just wondered if it had changed at all.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Pappas, I don't think it's, I mean, the mission morphs a little bit, in terms of peaks and valleys of how many people come, but it's the same mission that they've got and doing the same thing. So, any other questions on slide 5? Yep, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I'm looking at that projects and events. I heard, I think, that the runway work in progress is at Guernsey. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Anderson, there's 2. There's actually getting some runway work done in Cheyenne right now. That's part of the Cheyenne Airport's renovation project that they're doing. So that limits us a little bit. But most of the work, the one I was referring to, is at Guernsey. It's a tactical airstrip in our north training area. All right. Any other questions on number 4 there? All right, if we go quickly to number 5, really, I've covered most of the stuff, but I did just want to talk to you about the 2 pictures on the side there. If you see the C-130, it's one of Wyoming's yellow tails. You can generally tell Wyoming C-130s with that yellow slash, that horizontal slash on the tail back there. That's them practicing some evasive maneuver. Those are flares that are coming out the back. And if you look at the picture below this, this was a conversation that we had with our soldiers and airmen that were going out to support the presidential inauguration. And that was right during their deployment before they left. So great stuff. I think most of the other stuff that we've talked about on this slide, Mr. Chairman, can I?
Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, on page 4, that last line is you're going to have the Golden Coyote planned for 12 through the 26th of June. What's a Golden Coyote?
Hey, Mr. Chairman, Golden Coyote's a big logistics exercise. It's actually run by the South Dakota National Guard. And if you look at South Dakota's patch, they have a coyote on it. And so that's the Golden Coyote is the name. But they practice hauling logistical supplies across some real time, from South Dakota to Guernsey, across that. So it's a big logistical exercise that we do. All right. If you could, we'll go to slide 6. My intent was really to talk a little bit about the American Rescue Plan and what our plans were and recommendations were, but the governor's office has not. We submitted some, but we haven't received approval yet on what they're thinking. So I don't have much to tell you on that one just yet, sir. As soon as I get the cleared go ahead, I will certainly brief the committee on what would be beneficial for us, sir. All right.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. So General, relating to the American Rescue Plan, is that the federal stimulus dollars and whether or not we can leverage any of that to assist Camp Guernsey or maybe the Cheyenne Airport, whatever? Is that what you're referencing? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Comer, Chairman, yes, sir, it is.
So Mr. Chairman, we have, and this is for the committee as well, we've kind of set aside June 21st, 2 or 3 hours that we can maybe get together via Zoom if we decide as a committee by tomorrow that we want to forward any recommendations that we might want to consider during the special session if we have one in July. So keep that in the back of your minds. And this is certainly something of interest to us, General. Even though we don't have anything specific at this point, we may want to put a placeholder in our minds for that Zoom meeting, Mr. Chairman, on June 21st. So just thinking out loud with you. Thank you.
General, proceed, and I just lost everything on this.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think I'm about to turn it over to Mr. Shepard and talk a little bit about the museum, and then we'll go through the updates for skilled nursing. But just one final check, Chairman, if there's any other questions before we move on to the next portion.
Right. Representative Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General, could you just briefly discuss the work that was done and maybe possibly will continue at the intergalactic spaceport?
General?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman, Representative Baker. So intergalactic spaceport was what we call an innovative readiness project that was done, and that's usually done as an ability to train our mission type of activities and benefit a community. And it's called an IRT, or Innovative Readiness Training Program. So the town of Green River had asked us over a period of years to come out and assist with their intergalactic spaceport. And so we finally cracked the nut on getting that done. And we actually sent a company of our 133rd engineers out, a piece of that company to help level that spaceport and do some work around drainage and that sort of thing this last summer. I believe we finished up, we did it in 2 iterations in July, I believe, in September of last year. And that's where that IRT, Innovative Readiness Project, ended. I have heard that Green River is interested in doing some more, and we got to go through the IRT project again. But I tell you, the town of Green River treated us great, and our soldiers of the 133rd really had a great time. That's one of the things that they do, is build airfields, is one of their mission essential tasks. And they had a great time at Green River doing that task, sir.
Okay, General, proceed. I think we're on to skilled nursing facility.
Well, good morning, Mr. Chairman and committee. It's good to see you again. Just saw you a little bit ago out at the cemetery, but again, I want to thank all of you for coming out to the cemetery. Really appreciated that. And I appreciated your comments at your opening, Mr. Chairman.
If you would, for the record, your name and function.
I'm Tim Shepard, and I'm the Executive Director for the Wyoming Veterans Commission.
Thank you, Tim.
You bet, sir. So I did want to talk just a little bit before we get into skilled nursing, talk a little bit about the museum. I did want to thank everyone who supported the funding or restoring the funding for the museum. We really believe in the museum and what it does. We think that telling the story of what our veterans have done is important. We just kind of got caught in a catch-22 on what were we going to do. But the funding was restored and we were able to move forward. And part of that moving forward was to get with Parks and Cultural Resources to talk about, what are the areas where we can find some synergy between the organizations, and where can we learn some from them to help us as we continue to run this museum. And so We actually had a meeting on the 30th of May in Cheyenne with Mr. Westby and his crew. They're in Cheyenne, and it was a great meeting. We talked a lot about, what is it that we're doing at the museum in Casper? How does that fit in with what they're doing? Where doesn't it fit? What resources can we bring to bear to help us as we move forward? And actually today, we actually have representatives from Parks and Cultural Resources here to work on the museum and to look at our collections. So we see that as some of the first steps as we move forward, and we'll continue to do that. We also were able to leverage through Parks and Cultural Resources, their printing contract, to produce a brochure that would have cost us 5 to 10 times what it's costing us to have it produced through them. So we see some cost benefits in all of this too. So I think I'll stop there and see if there are any questions on the museum at this point.
I guess.
Senator Anderson.
Mr. Chairman, do we have an employee out there or employees out there at the museum now? Are they full-time or part-time?
Mr. Shepherd?
Mr. Chairman, through you, for the senator, yes, we do. We actually have Mr. John Woodward, who's here today off to my left. And then we're in the process of hiring a curator position. So we'll actually have 2 full-time positions at the museum.
Mr. Co-Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So Director Shepherd, I have often wondered if there is are you able to receive additional items? And do you have, or do you have quite a bit in storage that it's you're just unable to display? I'm just curious about what sort of assets do we have for the museum and where are we at with that?
Mr.
Director
Chairman, I'm sorry, sir. Mr. Chairman, for the co-chairman, we do have quite a bit. We do have quite a bit in storage, and that's part of what we want to look at is what do we do with that collection and how do we move forward with that? That's part of the expertise that we're hoping that through Parks and Cultural Resources, we can take advantage of. We're always open though to a new collection. Is it going to be something that we don't presently have and that we may be able to display at some point?
Thank you.
Director Shepherd, please continue.
All right, with that, we'll move on to slide 8. And that is a facade of a skilled nursing facility cottage in Buffalo. I think for some of you, this is a review. For some of you, you may not have seen this yet, so we thought we'd include it. And I did
Mr.
want to mention that to my left is Mr. Ryan Scranton from the construction office. And when we get into the technical portion of this, Ryan will be answering your questions. So, but with that, slide 9 is
Chairman?
sorry.
Senator Anderson.
Mr. Chairman, that frontal view of the skilled nursing facility, does that open up to the mountains so that they can see the mountains?
Director?
Well, it depends on the cottage, Mr. Chairman, for the senator. Some to the west, it does. The ones further to the east won't open to the mountains.
Please proceed.
Okay, and so if you go to slide 9, you see an overview of the 3 cottages as they are in their present position where we're actually doing the construction. Are there any questions on that overview? Otherwise, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Scranton and let him talk through the specifics of the project.
Mr. Scranton, please.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Co-Chair, and members of the committee. Ryan Scranton, Project Manager with the State Construction Department. As Mr. Shepherd mentioned on the previous slide, that's kind of a architect's rendering of what the skilled nursing facility will look like, the cottages. Neighboring this facility is the historic hospital, which the skilled nursing facility drew some design features from. The high narrow dormers, the horizontal slat siding, and the dual pitched roof there. These, what you're looking at here is the front of the cottages. And on the front of the cottages, they do face to the north and northwest. On the front side of the cottages are all of the services, laundry, mechanical room, IT closet, and the client bedrooms are on the south side of the cottages. On page 9, this is a site plan showing the cottages adjacent to the existing Veterans Home of Wyoming. The 3 cottages shown in orange. The top of your page is north, and we will be installing a new loop road around the vet's home and including the cottages there, just to give you kind of a reference of where these are.
Mr. Scranton, quick question, just reminder for the committee. About how many residents will the 3 cottages hold?
Mr. Chairman, each cottage has 12 beds, so 36 clients total.
Thank you. Please continue. Oh, Senator Furphy. You'll just have to speak up, I guess.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me ask, construction materials have recently skyrocketed in cost. Have you already contracted for most of the materials to finish this project? Thank you.
Mr. Scranton.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Furphy, yes, we went under contract September of last year. I think that was probably a little later than we had planned, but as far as feeling effects of COVID, we've been fortunate in that regard.
Continue.
On slide 10, just going through some completed work and progress that's taking place now. Cottage 3 is the northernmost cottage. That's where the contractor started and have moved south and west to cottage 2 and cottage 1. So cottage 3, they've got the floor on, the exterior framing complete, and they are finishing up the roof framing at this point. Got some exterior sheathing on and wrapping that up as well. Cottage 2, they've got the bar joists in, the metal deck is installed. They're working through penetrations on the metal deck for mechanical equipment and getting the deck ready for the concrete slab. And they should pour the concrete slab next week. Cottage 1, the footings are in place and the crews have done all the underground mechanical, electrical, and plumbing rough in. Once the concrete crew is done with cottage 2, they'll move over to cottage 1. Moving on to slide 11. This is the.
Mr. Scranton, just a quick question. Is the construction on schedule? It might just be me. Things don't seem to get built as fast as I think they should. Or we had delays due to COVID and those things in the past year. It seems the last time I saw slides, they were very similar to these. And I was just curious as how the work is progressing actually.
Certainly, Mr. Chairman. We are on schedule. We adjusted the substantial completion date prior to the construction based on a later start date. We were waiting for federal funding. That the impact of that was moving the substantial completion date 45 days. So that's June of 2022. The contractor initially wasn't sure if they were going to get into the soil on all 3 cottages this first winter. they did. And, they're kind of doing this as a development style, just moving through each cottage. So it may seem slow at times, but they're making very good progress there.
Okay, thank you. So just to follow up to that, mostly for Director Shepherd, once cottage 3 is completed and you're completing them in order, so you have one ahead of the others and that sort of thing, will you accept residents at that point, or are you going to wait until all 3 cottages are completed? Whichever of you is. Mr. Scranton, go ahead if you have the answer.
Mr. Chairman, we've talked about accepting the cottages and doing a phased substantial completion on each cottage. As far as going operational, I think that would be a Department of Health determination. And I don't know where they're at with that.
Okay, thank you. Continue.
So on slide 11, this is the south side of cottage 3. Just getting the framing up and exterior sheathing on. A few weeks later, again, cottage 3. This is probably 3 or 4 days into roof trusses. They are, as I mentioned, they're about 95% done with the roof trusses at this point.
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Anderson.
I have 2 questions. I'm not familiar with these roof trusses, metal roof trusses. Are they light enough that you can handle them, that personnel can handle them there, or do you require a crane?
Mr. Scranton.
Mr. Chairman and Senator Anderson, they've been using a combination of a truck crane as well as a telehandler forklift to put the trusses in place.
Mr. Chairman?
Follow up?
Yes, I don't see anywhere in this presentation about the water line. Did we get the water line done? Did you get money from the water group, or how did that come out?
Mr. Scranton.
They had originally planned on doing that work done April 15th and May 15th. They were a little late on that. Before they got the water line.
Senator. Mr. Scranton. Scranton, please continue.
Oh,
Mr. Co-Chairman.
I appreciate Senator Anderson bringing that up, and I'm sorry to hammer on this, but we knew we had water problems at the beginning. And so what we ended up doing then is coming out of water 3 probably, or water development funds. Is that my understanding, or where did that funding come from to upgrade that water system?
Mr. Scranton.
Chairman, no. The funding for the water line came from the city.
Okay.
Not from the water.
Okay, thank you for that. That was my understanding, and I thought maybe we took a little different turn. Thank you.
Continue.
On slide 13, various materials delivered to site. Materials delivered ahead of progress based on the way that staying on top of it. Like 14, again, this was that's the now. This is cut to 14. All of the all stays. Concrete pad there. All footing. This is currently all the barge width. upcoming events, I kind of touched on this. Take a look at products we finishing up, products two, we've got the concrete pour for the slab. Thank you. Once concrete's in though, they'll start doing the exterior framing, interior framing and roof trusses there as well. And then cottage one, we're just into the ground. So foundation walls, metal deck and concrete there. With that, that's the update for the skilled nursing facility. I'll stand for any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Scranton? Thank you, Mr. Scranton. At this point, I think I'll take just a brief privilege for the newer members of the committee. Some history on the facility. Wyoming was the only state that did not have a veteran skilled nursing facility. And this is for veterans who really require 24-hour care that's not available in other facilities. And with a lot of work on the part of previous members of this committee, established the skilled nursing facility, located it in Buffalo due to being in more of a rural setting. And that for our veterans who need that very, very intensive care. So that's just some of the history, why we're considering this, why it is a major event for the state. And thank you, Mr. Shepherd, Mr. Scranton, for all your work on this. And so with that, I think.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Senator Anderson.
the other group we need to hear from on this skilled nursing facility is the health department. One of the issues for these skilled nursing facilities is they have to have a cadre of doctors and nurses, of which Buffalo at the time did not have any. In fact, the 8 doctors that were there wrote a letter and said they could not handle these complicated situations. So the next meeting, maybe we could hear from the health department how they're doing with getting the doctors and nurses in Buffalo to take care of this. Because if we don't get that, we don't get any soldiers coming to the facility. Thank you.
Very good point, Senator. So I'd ask staff to just write that on the list for next meeting. We'd like to hear from the Department of Health on staffing the facility. And I remember that, Senator, that there was a considerable amount of discussion on the ability to staff the facility. Other questions, comments? Okay. Let's go on to the Oregon Trail Veterans Cemetery. General, proceed. Oh, Mr. Co-Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, just for future reference, I'm curious as to what we're doing to get these back on again. Did we just have a package of batteries back there that we're just trading these out? Because we got another dead one here.
Yes.
Okay. Gotcha. I think we might have been doing that, but we'll make sure up here that we've got them off. Thank you, Joe. Okay. All right.
Mr. Chairman,
Heather?
Mr. Chairman, the button also seems a bit finicky, so you might press it 2 or 3 times, because that's actually all I've been doing. Like when one goes out, I bring it over here, I press it a few times, and then that's the one I keep switching out with people. I'm not doing anything magic, so I don't even know. I guess you have to shift to one side and hold your tongue one way and press it a few times, and then it works.
Okay, thank you, Heather.
That's good to know. Thank you,
Yes.
Mr. Chairman.
Okay, General, with that lesson in IT, proceed. And it seems the general is the first one to have a problem. Yeah. General, remember, you are being broadcast live. Okay.
So that's what.
So that's what we're talking about. We think this would be, we think this would be beneficial to help ensure the tranquility of the cemetery and give us that buffer that we desire to ensure that no encroachment or development comes in. That particular chunk of land is actually state land already. It is a school section land it's done that. So if we go to slide 16, as we take, excuse me, let's leave it on slide 17. I'm sorry. What our recommendation is we think we can do this through the executive branch. Discussions with the Office of State Land and Investment. We think that we can have them label this land as state military land. We're doing some similar work in our Guernsey training area, which has some school sections in it, which is a little bit problematic for us in terms of our ability to maneuver and train. And so what we're doing is we're taking those school sections and we're pushing them to the south of the training area. So that makes it a little more easier to graze, easier to do development. And we'd like to approach OSLI and do the same type of thing here. It would remain state land. It's just that the Wyoming Military Department would control any grazing leases on it and any access to it. And so, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, that's the tact we'd like to take at this in the meantime, is to work through OSLI and have that resolution rather than come to you and having a change in law.
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Anderson.
Mr. Chairman, so would you fence this area so that it's set aside, or what do you do to set it aside?
General?
Mr. Chairman, there will be some fencing on the south part. I don't know, Mr. Shepherd, if we've done any fencing on the east. I don't know that we need to do that on the western side of the property, but on the southern side, there's intent to do that near the road.
Representative McGuire.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to have a brief discussion and maybe discuss proposing a bill, and that would be to place restrictive covenants on the state land, all the state land surrounding the cemetery, to give the cemetery, well, to put it in statute, put it in writing for all to see that there will be no development of that area, and that you can't park a bunch of junk on it, and that you can't do things. That the covenants would be that there would be restrictive covenants to preserve the current sanctity of the site and the views of the site. And I think we ought to have it in writing, plain as day, right in the statute, so that we don't have people wanting to bring in wind turbines or whatever else, that it is what it's going to be forever and no negotiations. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Co-Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And to follow up on the good representative's comments, I think it's very realistic that we could end up with a pole barn, right south of there too. If we're running some livestock or whatever, I think that we should consider that, and maybe tomorrow we could request a draft just so the committee can review that. The caution that I would have is we've worked so hard, and by the way, thank both of you gentlemen for everything you've done for our community over there. It's been a long and arduous process and difficult, and it's going to mean a lot to that community to have that other egress. That said, I want to make sure that our citizens have access to the road itself. And so we want to make sure in the draft of that legislation that the language is stated such so that the public can get back and forth. As long as we can do that, I think there's plenty of space up there to maintain some great sanctity. So,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, General, your concept of designating it as state military land and Representative McGuire's proposal, do they conflict? Are they compatible with each other? I would imagine that you would keep it as state military land as it is as a buffer. However, theoretically, you could also use it as a gunnery range. And would there be, the right of way granted for that road across that land if you do that? I would want that in there. The road's already under construction, so those issues, please.
Mr. Chairman, I think it would be compatible. Certainly our intent by making it state military land is to prevent exactly what Representative McGuire brings up, which is any grazers that would happen to come and lease it and bring stuff onto it. We probably wouldn't do that. But to that extent, to ensure that's the case, I think that's where the compatibility comes in. I certainly don't think we'd have any problem to designate it state military land and also lay these codicils on top of them that talk about that. And I believe that road is, Tim, correct me, but I don't think there's any issue with access to that road now. I think they've got right of way to go through there. There's no way that I think we would come back and try to mess with that. But certainly I'm not opposed to us doing as the Representative McGuire suggested and enumerating that in some sort of document.
Okay. All right, General, because I drove that road this morning and really, other than for one particular spot, there's no view problem between the road and the cemetery. You can't see one from the other, except for that one spot where it goes over the hill and then drops down on the west side. You're out of sight again. So I think with staff, do you have enough to put together a bill and to start looking at that to do those things? Just put it on the list.
Mr. Chairman, yes, I've noted that, and I was actually looking at the statute that established the Veterans Cemetery. So
Okay.
yes, it's noted.
All
Thank
right,
you.
thank you. And for the staff, as we do these things, we think we need something done, we'll sure let you know at the time, rather than doing catch up late tomorrow afternoon. Senator Landon.
Just real
Chairman
quickly
Landon.
to follow up on your good comments. A lot of the work that we did as a delegation here in this county and as a state resulted in that road being pushed to the south. And so purposefully, we took that road as far away from the cemetery as we could, and for the very purpose that we're talking about today. So really pleased that we've gotten to where we are. And again, I just want to thank everybody involved, Mr. Detai with the Veterans Commission, and certainly Mr. Shepherd and the general, everybody. So it's going to be a good thing. Thank you.
Okay. Senator Anderson.
Looking at this map, and at first I was thinking you were just talking about the yellow parcel, but as I read it, there's a state parcel there, which is in the gray. Is that what you're talking about, making it totally privy, or just the yellow part?
General.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, our intent is to talk with OSLI and have them designate the yellow part as state military land. Now, if they would, it's school section land, the rest of it, if they wanted to do that, we certainly could, because I don't think they're going to put any, as we said, some of the, they'll graze it. That's the only thing that's happening, right? I don't think they would put wind farms and that sort of thing on it. But at the minimum, we'd like to do the yellow. If OSLI is interested in entertaining the rest of that school section, we'd certainly not be opposed to it.
Okay. Well, General, proceed.
I think that's the last that I had on the cemetery. If it pleases the committee, I'll move to interim topic 2, which was an examination of some state-sponsored recruiting initiatives.
Before we move on the veteran cemeteries, or any public comment? Anyone from the public? Do we have anyone on Zoom or?
Mr. Chairman, we do not.
Okay, thank you. With that, then I'll close public comment. Mr. Co-Chairman.
Just real quickly, before we leave that topic, gentlemen, did I see, and I don't know why I didn't notice this before, but did I see some windmills up on the north side of that facility this morning? I didn't realize that we had some windmills fairly close to our cemetery to the north.
General?
Just curious.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I don't have the vision of those. I don't know, Tim, if you do either. So I'll go take a look.
Mr. Co-Chairman, you're correct. There are wind turbines out there that are kind of to the north and east. I could not tell how far away they were. I was kind of surprised they were as close as they were, though.
Yeah, I actually was too, Mr. Chairman, but anyway, thank you. General, I just noticed them.
Mr. Co-Chairman, I would think if you looked at this map, where they are located is kind of off of the map. They were not, so they are, I'm estimating, yes, probably a mile or two more away than you think they are. But they are there. I did see them. Okay, and did everyone hear Representative McGuire? Those turbines are on private land. Okay.
Mr.
Right,
Chairman,
anything else?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
just for, we're moving forward with in the documentation of this meeting, I think that the question based on the yellow buffer in the key, should there be a little yellow splotch there? Is that word is not for the state parcel buffer, and there should be a little yellow splotch, right? Okay, I just want to make sure so that
General?
it referred to the right thing.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, yes, I think that would be a little clearer to people understand what the buffer zone is. If we put a little yellow key in it, that's fine. We'll do that.
Thank you, Mr.
All right, thank you. Okay. Okay. And no public comment. So General, proceed.
Thank you, sir. I'm slide 1818 on state-sponsored recruiting initiatives. I believe I've testified in front of the committee before that my number one priority in the military department is that of strength and in strength. And that's for multiple reasons. Most of it being, though, we can't train and deploy a vacancy. We need to have soldiers and airmen that can be there to do the job. So as we tried to focus about what we wanted to do in the interim, it came down to how do we affect strength in some way or form. So the first thing was on the recruiting side of it, the accession side of gaining people in. And as we took a look at it, we're actually doing pretty good in the accessions piece. The Wyoming Army Guard sits at about 100%, 101%, give or take in terms of strength at the moment. And our accessions continue to do very well. The Wyoming Air Guard is at 94% right now, but that represents a 3% growth just this year in accessions. And so as we surveyed the force and we tried to take a look at, all right, what brings people in, the most common was money, was an incentive of dollars. And so we went down the road of, okay, how do we incentivize on top of what the federal government does in terms of an enlistment bonus or an enlistment sort of contract that comes in? Could we do even more to maybe reward somebody that refers an individual that gets them in to get more, in effect, more recruiters out there? As we took a look at what that would take and the amount of oversight, and what we decided to do was our strength accessions issues are such right now that I didn't want to go down that road. I didn't want to have to set up basically a group of folks to oversee dissemination payments, reduction of fraud, all that kind of stuff for folks to come in. So in terms of the accessions recruiting part, recommendation to the committee is we don't go down that road at this point, and that we don't take any actions on the recruiting initiatives side of the house, if that makes sense.
Okay. Representative Baker, question?
Yeah, thank you, General. Could you briefly refresh my memory? I know that there was kind of a swap with another state as far as MOSs, and how has that impacted the state in recruiting?
General?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Baker, there's a force structure swap happening between the state of Wyoming and the state of Alaska. And what it does is our 133rd Engineer Company will be transferred to Alaska. And in return, we'll get a detachment of engineers, which you can think it's the same as our engineer company, about 50 people less than that. And so that will come back to us. And we'll also get a Delta Weapons Infantry Company that comes to us from Alaska. The net of that is about a -8 in force structure for us. So it's pretty much a 1-for-1 swap. We lose about 8 folks in force structure. We're actually trying to get 2 Lakota aircraft to come to the state next year. It's a smaller helicopter that gives us 25, so an additional 25 folks. So we'll stay right about that 1,600 mark on the Army side.
General, just,
Mr. Chairman.
oh, Senator.
Mr. Chairman, a question on the Army Guard strength and the Air Guard strength. How many people does that represent? And I want to tell you, I'm impressed with these young people that are willing to volunteer to serve their country. You know, what you see in the press is people who are not willing to serve their country. And here we have quite a few. I don't know how many that is, but that's my question, is how many is that?
General?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Anderson, on the Army Guard, that 101% represents 1,600 soldiers. On the Air Guard, that 94% represents 1,275 airmen.
Wow. Impressive.
Yes, sir. They're doing a great job.
All right. General, if I'm not mistaken, because we've discussed that swap with Alaska, in your opinion, is that call it a net gain in capability for the Wyoming Guard?
Mr. Chairman, it is there's two things that the detachment from Alaska will give us that we don't have now. The first one is some concrete capability. We don't have the ability to pour concrete and do that. So it'll give us that capability. The second thing is, over the years, the 133rd is a big engineering company. It used to have the ability to move itself, to haul itself around to the areas. Over many force structure changes, that capability has been weaned away. So while we have lots of equipment, we don't have the vehicles to get it anywhere very quickly. So we get some more of those vehicles with this engineered attachment. So I think we'll make us more responsive to domestic operations, because we can actually haul our equipment there and we get that concrete capability.
Okay, thank you, General. And just as a side for everyone on the committee, Representative McGuire checked, those wind turbines are 7/10 of a mile from the cemetery, which is a little closer than I thought they were. So, Mr. Co-Chairman.
Thank you for that information. I appreciate the representative doing a little homework for us. General, I'm just curious, as we draw down forces around the world, whether that's a good move or not a good move.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking about that, but I'm wondering if that will affect what we're talking about here this morning, our ability to recruit, good Guardsmen.
General?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Co-Chairman, I think it's a great question. It's something that we continue to deal with. I think you're going to see, certainly on the Army side, they're going to put a lot of money and effort into modernization. And that's the senior leadership of the Army is committed to being able to fight a peer-to-peer conflict with China, Russia, and those kind of folks. And right now they feel that the weapon systems we have right now are not capable of doing that. So they're going to put a tremendous amount of money into modernization, future vertical lift, long-range precision fires, enhancing soldier, all those things that they do. I think also at the same time, you will see, that we're probably not, we're coming out of Afghanistan. We'll see where we go in Southwest Asia and Spartan Shield if we stay there. But I think you'll see almost a retreat back to prior 9/11 in the terms of the use of the Guard and the reserves, that maybe our mobilizations won't be as robust as we've done before. That crystal ball for me is broken. I don't do a very good job of predicting it. I'm probably going to be wrong when I say that, because 2 days from now something will happen and we'll be right back into the spin of things. But like you, right now, Wyoming, the Wyoming Guard, we over recruit our population. I think that the statistics actually tell us we should be somewhere in the neighborhood of 1,500. So our folks do a better job than what the statistics tell us that we should do. Our population is getting older, and it's not growing as fast. So all that continues to cause us concerns of how we keep members in the National Guard. So it's something I think about a lot, Mr. Co-Chairman.
Senator McCune.
I just have a quick question, sir. When we're talking 101%, are we talking about traditional TO&E or an MTO&E at 101%?
General?
Mr. Chairman, Senator McEwen, that's inclusive of both TDA units and TNO units. That's the entire force structure in the National Guard.
So it's your full TO&E.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Representative Ron.
If you don't have it right now, fine, but the potential, if you could just get the committee back some information on what our in-state guardsmen versus our out-of-state guardsmen, what that population looks like.
General?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Brown, I actually have that chart. I don't think we brought it with us, did we, by chance? My very good exec, Major Morris, said, look this up here. Look at that. Thank you. That's right. She's good at this stuff. So right now on the Air National Guard, we have about 33% of our folks are out of state. On the Army Guard, it's about 25% represented.
General?
All right, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, as we move from the recession side of it, the other side of this is the retention side of keeping our soldiers and airmen in.
General, just an interruption. I apologize. Your recommendation is to just table the discussion on recruiting at this point in time. I would remind you, though, that the co-chairman and I have discussed that we won't be doing any new bills the last meeting. So if you have legislation you need, we need to have it ready for the next meeting to start considering. So we only do 3 meetings, and just a reminder. Okay, but
yes, sir, Mr. Chairman, my intent is not to spring any last minute legislation up on you. The decision that we make here will have to carry us through until the next interim.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir. As I said, as we move out of the recruiting side, there are some things that we looked at on the retention side of the house, and that's really where we want to put some of our time, effort, and energy, because we spend a great amount of money and time and resources training soldiers and airmen, and being able to keep them is critical for us. And as we did the survey of the force out there, one of the common themes that came across was that of childcare. And our young families and young soldiers and airmen that, particularly if they're both in the military, childcare when they're doing IDT or drills with us is significant for folks. As a matter of fact, about a little over a third of our force indicated that it was a factor in whether they stay or not going forward. So what we would like to submit is we would like to be able to provide reimbursable childcare at some level that to our folks that require it. And I think we've got some work to do that we owe you still in terms of some of the rule sets on, is that just first termers? Is it second term? How much is it? Is there a limit on children? That's the kind of work that we're still working through right now. But that's our intent, is to be able to reimburse for childcare. And the funding that we intend to use this is the other part that I would like the input of the committee on. As many of you may remember, approximately 15 to 20 years ago, the state of Wyoming established a military trust fund. The intent, there was a $5 million corpus that was established. And from the interest of that corpus that came out of that, we could take that money and we could assist Wyoming residents, Wyoming guardsmen, Wyoming reservists that had trouble financially. If, for example, on a deployment, they had a refrigerator that went out, and this money was designed to pay for that refrigerator, or a hailstorm hit and totaled their roof, and those kind of things. And so the state of Wyoming established this trust fund to handle those kind of incidents. It's been very effective. We've used it well, but as our deployments start to come back, and frankly, our interest is growing in that account. we would propose that we would fund childcare out of this military trust fund account. And what that would take is some rewording of the trust fund to allow that to happen, which if the committee were able to seize it that way, we would like to provide that at the next meeting and have discussion about the trust fund and the specifics of that.
Questions? So, General, how much money is in the trust fund and about what does it generate in interest a year, please?
Mr. Chairman, there's currently $2.1 million of interest. That's above the $5 million corpus. So there's $2.1 million in interest in the interest account this year. If we take a look in 2019, we generated $177,000. In 2020, $120,000, and last year was $89,000.
Thank you, General. So how much providing subsidized childcare? Do you have an estimate of how much that would impact the interest account? And I realize the interest in that account is building, so you're not using all of it. Just curious if you have an estimate on that.
Mr. Chairman, we don't yet. We're still working through those details. That's my intent to bring to you is this is what I think it's going to cost us.
Okay, and General, that would only be to subsidize childcare, not provide childcare, correct?
Mr. Chairman, the intent right now is for us to, yes, subsidize or reimburse for childcare that's already contracted by the individuals that come to drill.
Okay, thank you. Representative Stiver.
Retain soldiers and not for deployed soldiers.
General?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Stiver, so for this part, the child care piece of it would be to retain soldiers. I think what you're asking me is if folks are deployed, that we would pay for their child care while they're deployed. I don't think that's the intent, but the trust fund would still continue to still do those types of reimbursement to soldiers and airmen, like I said, that had a refrigerator that goes out and that sort of thing. So if I may be reading too much into your question, but the trust fund would still continue to exist and do the things it was initially intended to do. It would also provide money to reimburse for childcare.
Or follow up, Mr. Chairman. So it's only for the weekend drills. Is that what you're saying, sir?
General.
Mr. Chairman, that is correct. Although I certainly am going to run the numbers for an annual training, our number of 15 days of annual training. If we had people that needed to do it, then I'm going to run the numbers for that and provide that to you too.
So, General, to do this, you said you felt it needed some legislative changes in the statutes. Do you have suggestions for those or wording?
Mr. Chairman, I think that's the discussion I wanted to have here today with the group. If you thought, because this trust fund is an interesting one and you always, do you want to shine a line on it particularly, but it's generating money. We're going to have to do something with it in either we're going to have to deal with it in some way, shape or form. But if the committee is willing to do this, I would like to come back in August with the full package for you, sir, the details of how much, where, what the language is, the whole 9 yards. If you're willing to do it, then we'll work with LSO to build that law.
Heather?
Mr. Chairman, it looks like at Wyoming statutes 19-7-402, there are some listed uses of the fund. And so I'm not drafting legislation on the fly by any means, and there's certainly additional checks and cross references that may need to be made, but it seems as though adding to the uses there, because currently the fund is to alleviate financial hardships faced by, and then a list of items. So it seems as though this trust fund exists in statute, and so that might be where we would begin if you were to direct us to do so.
Heather, put that on the list also. And I think from what you're saying is it would only take wording to indicate it was a specific use for childcare subsidy for weekend drills and potentially for summer camp, 2 weeks of summer. So just think about some wording and I guess that'll be ready to go next meeting. We can look at that.
Noted, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Okay, General, continue that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I think the last one we have is the delegation of authority. And I'm going to actually bring up somebody new to the committee. This is Major Karen Hinkle, who serves as our judge advocate for the wing. And I'm gonna have her walk.
General, before we go there,
Yes,
just bear with me a little bit. You know, this is our first interim committee meeting and we're kind of kicking the dust off. Any public comment on retention and recruiting? Anyone out in the Zoom world?
Mr. Chairman, we don't have any public comment on this topic.
Okay, and none in the room. So with that, I'll end public comment. Thank you, General. Proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I think we are ahead of schedule a little bit.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I should buy you some time today. So we finished up on slide 2020 with the recommendation. I think we're all tracking now and appreciate the committee's support there. As I was saying, I would like to move the delegation of parental authority discussion over to a new member of the team that you may not have met before. This is Major Karen Hinkle. She serves as our judge advocate for the 153rd Airlift Wing, and I'll let her talk.
Thank you, General. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Co-Chairman, and members of the committee. Just to give you a brief introduction to this topic, we are recommending that the committee consider looking at a delegation of parental authority within statute. Just to give you a bit of background. So Wyoming is a state that does not have statutory language that authorizes parents to delegate to another person temporary authority to manage the affairs of their children. And for members of the military in particular, this can become an issue when they deploy or they are out of state for a period of time for training. For example, basic training can be anywhere from 6 to 8 weeks to a number of several months, depending on the complexity of the technical school that they're attending. And so many times those members will have children go stay with parents or other siblings of the parents, and it can be challenging for them if an issue arises for them to execute either medical decisions, enroll them in school, or take care of other challenges that might arise. So a number of states that are surrounding Wyoming have adopted into statute mechanisms through which that authority can be codified, or I guess presented in paper. And so it's not necessary, or it's not always a requirement that it be codified in statute. It's a common law practice that Wyoming has used for many years. And so one of the practices that I regularly engage in when I provide legal assistance is craft a very simple piece of paper that says, I am the parent of this child. I'm delegating authority to this individual. These are the types of duties that they can undertake on behalf of my child. And then typically we will allow them to have that signed for 2 years, and then they can reinitiate that at the end of 2 years if they need to continue that. The reason that this has become an issue that we would like the committee to consider is because at some time in the past year or so, a gentleman from Utah who was taking care of some grandchildren wanted to get a kind of a power of attorney to take his grandchildren on a trip. And he had an acquaintance in somewhere in the western part of the state who was a judge. Apparently that judge informed him that he did not believe that he was able to do that delegation of authority because it was not codified in statute. And so there is some question and difference of opinion about whether it's necessary to do a statute or whether the common law is sufficient. The concern that the military department has is that if it is decided to be put forward in statute, that it would be crafted in a way that doesn't negatively impact the military members' ability to perform the mission. And so we have done some research on the surrounding states' codes. Typically, what most states have done is they've recommended a 6-month limitation. And then for members of the military, often states have made an exception to either allow that as a longer period of time, up to a year. Some states have conditioned it on the length of duty that the member is performing. We would recommend something probably along the lines of 2 years, but that's language that we could kind of hash out with LSO and then get a draft to you for consideration in August. Standing by for any questions.
Mr. Co-Chairman.
So And I apologize, Ms. Hinkle, I did not get your rank. Is it major?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, it's major.
Hinkle. Thank you for being here today, and I appreciate all of your thoughts with regard to Senate File 128. I had a good meeting with Senator Kinski, who had this drafted up with the help of our staff. I'm just curious what we ran into and why that there was some concerns over that bill and why it didn't go forward. So are we able now to fill some holes and smooth it out so that the committee can consider it?
Mr. Chairman and Mr. Co-Chairman, my understanding of some of the concerns that were raised, and I will say I was not present for the discussion of that particular bill, but one of the concerns was how the delegation of parental authority interplays with court orders. And if there's, for example, folks going through divorce, how those two documents might coexist or be rectified. In my research, I actually found some language that really helps clarify that. I mean, first off, the court order is always going to take precedence over any temporary delegation of authority because the parent can only delegate the authority that they have to another person. But there are some states that have some pretty good language in terms of codifying that. So it at the forefront answers those questions. And I think that would address a lot of the concerns that some of the judicial committee members had regarding how that would interconnect.
Follow up, Mr. Chairman.
So thank you, Mr. Chairman. So just to follow up then, it sounds to me like you're confident that if the committee chooses that it wants to go forward with drafting this and considering it at the next meeting, that you're confident that you can work with LSO and arrive at some language that might work. Okay, thank you for that.
Other question, Representative Stiver?
Real quick question. AR 600-20 command policy says that they have to have a family care plan. And I know when I was on active duty, I had a family care plan. And the power of attorney was fine. I shipped my kids from Germany back to the States and had no problems. So am I getting that this is going to, they're still going to have to do the family care plan. But this is just adding something to this in statutes. Is that correct?
Major?
Mr. Chairman and Representative Stiver, to answer your question, I'm not a member of the Army, so I'm not going to speak to the Army processes. But on the air side, we have an identical requirement. So our family care plan actually requires our members to come into my legal office and execute a power of attorney, which we refer to as in loco parentis. And they do that either for a year or 2 years, depending on how long we agree to make that eligible. The concern I have is not necessarily that it would add an additional requirement onto the member because they already have to have that documentation incorporated into their family care plan. The concern I would have is just to make sure that any codification of a statute that we do doesn't put a time limit on them that might cause them hardship if they have to deploy and re-accomplish the paperwork that's required under our regulations, if that makes sense.
Follow up, Representative?
I'm done right now. Let me think for a minute.
All right.
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Anderson.
Mr. Chairman, I'm surprised that a POA has a time limit. Is that something we put on them? The POAs I'm aware of are till I die. So is this something special with the military, this 2 years or 6 months or whatever it is? Why is there a time limit on these?
Major?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Anderson, that's a great question. So there's different kinds of powers of attorney. General powers of attorney and healthcare powers of attorney are two examples of documents that we'll produce that we will, in many cases, have an unlimited expiration on it. And so that will exist in perpetuity until the person is deceased. However, with special powers of attorney, where you're delegating a particular type of responsibility to an individual, those are usually conditioned for a shorter period of time. And there's numbers of reasons for that. Usually it's because you want to give some assurance to the person that's relying on that document that it's still valid and that it still meets the person's intent who signed the document. So with our family care plan delegations, given, I think, the complexities that can exist in family relationships, I usually advise them to reconsider the qualifications of the person that they're delegating authority to. And that's just a choice I've made. There's nothing that says it has to be 2 years. There's nothing that says right now it has to be 6 months. I just want to make sure that they are taking an active role and thinking about who's managing their children's affairs. It could be a longer or a shorter period of time.
Mr. Chairman, I think one of the key points that we might have glossed over today is when we're looking at federal family care plans in the Army or the Air Force active duty, it falls under federal statute. When we do family care plans in the Guard,
Mr. Chairman and Senator McCoon, I wasn't at the meeting, so again, I didn't get to hear their exact concerns, but I think that codifying this in statute provides some benefits for both members, the courts, and lawyers who are assisting in resolving family disputes, because it kind of sets out some very clear limitations and guidelines, given that this is a practice that we already routinely engage in. I do get questions pretty regularly from the field about how does this work in case of X. And so I think there's a lot of ability to work with the language to resolve the questions that the Judiciary Committee would have.
yes, Mr. Chairman. And I understand everybody's concern. This becomes another way to affect child custody in a divorce proceeding. So I think when we do the language, we got to stay away from that. They could actually use this to change things. And I think that was their concern. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, do you think the Judiciary Committee will be working this also? They had one, like they said, from last year from Senator Kinski. I wonder if they'll have one that maybe isn't exactly like ours, but maybe we could combine it or something.
Mr. Chairman, we can sure double check. I think that's a good point by the senator.
And I would ask that we
Yes, Mr. Chairman, just to clarify, I did have an opportunity to sit on a phone call with Mr. Smith and Senator Kinski, and he did just ask us to kind of take this on. And again, the intent here from the military department is only to make sure that the needs of military members specifically are addressed in any language. But obviously, the intent of the statute would be that it would affect anybody who is a parent who needs to delegate that authority. And that is all I have, sir.
Anything else? Right. Well, yeah, just a minute. So one question I have, it sticks in my mind, and I'm going purely and completely on memory here. I thought we addressed this issue 2 or 3 sessions ago. Am I wrong on that? I remember the discussions that we addressed the issue of, deployed guard members having to do something with their children and how we would address that as a state.
Mr. Chairman, we would have to look back. It's not coming to my recollection. Oh, maybe perhaps it's coming to Mr. Smith's recollection.
Mr. Smith.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chris Smith, the senior counsel for the Wyoming Military Department. I believe, could be wrong, but I believe what the chairman's referring to was there was some legislation that we put into the Military Protection Act in Title 19 that essentially said that while you're deployed, a court could not change the custody arrangement until you got back. So it added a protection for our deployed members so that their former spouse couldn't, while they are unable to defend themselves, try to switch around the custody. The second thing we added to the Protection Act similarly was the fact that they deployed or could deploy couldn't be a basis for a change of custody. So that may be what the chairman's referring to.
That might be, like I said, I'm relying.
It's been a while,
completely on
sir.
memory. Yes. Okay, thank you. Okay, with that, I'll open it up for public comment. Anyone in the room? Okay, anyone on? the
Mr.
internet?
Chairman, you have Director Corin Schmidt available for public comment.
Okay, Director, please let Director Schmidt in, please.
Hello, Mr. Chairman.
Director, how are you today?
I'm doing well, thank you. And hello to members of the committee. My name is Corin Schmidt, and I'm the Director of the Department of Family Services. And I was just merely on because of the conversation that occurred in the legislature last year regarding kind of the general conversation of parental authority, not necessarily specific to how it interplays with military families. But certainly we are also part of authority for parents with children have come into care. So merely here to listen, and also unfortunately I missed some of the discussion, the video or the audio cutout regarding the intersection of what Senator Kinski had been looking at with your bill. So we'll just be following this topic and available for questions as they come up.
Okay.
So thank you.
All right, any questions for Director Schmidt? You lucked out. Nobody has questions for you. All right, thank you, Director, very much. Okay. Any other public comment? Okay, with that, I'll close public comment. I think we decided to proceed with the Mr. Co-Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Just for clarification and to make sure it's understood, I'm looking over at our fine staff, and I would make that formal request. I don't know if we need a vote for it, but I think there's enough interest on the committee that we move forward and ask the general and his folks to assist on all fronts. And I think we had some good conversation about that bill. So, and I will also make it a point to check and make sure that we're not crossing up with some other committee. And maybe Heather, you could help me with that to make sure when we presented interim topics, Judiciary did not indicate that they would take this up. So I think we're okay, but I want to make sure. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Mary Beth and I have confirmed it's not in the list of judiciary topics. It's not on the radar to our knowledge. And it is noted that this bill draft request. Would you like a recap of the bill draft request since we are at the end of the military presentations, or is that
Heather,
too soon?
yes, please recap those things we decided to do.
The committee has requested drafting legislation to place restrictive covenants on all the state land surrounding the cemetery to prevent development. The committee has requested legislation to expand authorized uses of the Military Assistance Trust Fund And the committee has requested drafting legislation similar to the 2021 Senate File 128, but with some additional information that the military department and perhaps Senator McEwen and Representative Stivar have all collectively put together.
Thank you. Senator Anderson.
Chairman, again, I think what Heather said was all state lands around the veteran cemetery, and that was my question on the gray area and the yellow area. And if we do all state lands, covenants on them, that includes the gray land.
Mr. Chairman, I misspoke. I should
Heather.
have said the buffer zone.
Okay.
Okay, all right.
Okay. All right. And I think with that, we're ready to recess for lunch. Anything else? Okay, thank you very much. And General, if you do, as soon as possible, because we're looking at the 21st of June for that. Thank you. With that, we'll recess for lunch. And General, thank you and your staff for being here. You can hang with us and just see what we do, or I guess go home.